/TrueOffMyChest MIL called me trashy, so I exposed her criminal past. /TrueOffMyChest MIL called me trashy, so I exposed her criminal past. The words hit me like a slap across the face, echoing through the suddenly silent dining room. I don't know what my son was thinking, bringing home someone so trashy. You're clearly not worthy of this family. Every fork stopped midair. Every conversation died. 23 pairs of eyes swiveled between me and my mother-in-law Patricia, who sat there with that perfectly practiced smile plastered across her Botoxed face like she just commented on the weather instead of decimating what was left of my dignity. My husband Mark's jaw dropped, but he didn't say a word. Not one word. I felt the familiar burn of humiliation crawling up my neck, the same feeling I'd swallowed countless times over the past 2 years. The same feeling I'd choked down every time Patricia made her little comments about my interesting career choice as a legal assistant, my quaint apartment before I moved in with Mark, or my unconventional family background. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, except this time she'd gone for the jugular in front of the entire extended family. Patricia, Mark's and Karen started, but Patricia waved her off with a manicured hand. Oh, I'm just being honest. Someone has to say what we're all thinking. Look at her. Patricia gestured at me like I was an exhibit in a museum. The way she dresses, talks, carries herself. She's from a completely different world than us. I raised my son to have standards. The worst part? Part of me had always believed she was right. Growing up in a cramped apartment with a single mom who worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, I'd always felt like an imposter in Mark's world of country clubs and charity galas. Patricia had a sixth sense for insecurities, and she'd been slowly poisoning mine for 2 years. But sitting there, watching my husband's family exchange uncomfortable glances while he stared at his plate like a coward, something inside me snapped. Not the messy, emotional kind of snap, the cold, calculated kind. The kind that comes with a plan. You're absolutely right, Patricia, I said quietly, setting down my wine glass with steady hands. We are from different worlds. She looked surprised that I wasn't crying or running from the room like usual. Good. I should probably head home early, I continued, standing with as much grace as I could muster. Thank you for dinner. Mark finally looked up. Babe, wait. It's fine, I said, and I meant it. Because for the first time in 2 years, I had perfect clarity. Patricia thought she knew what trashy looked like. She thought she had the moral high ground to judge my worthiness. I'd spent the last 3 years working for one of the city's top law firms, learning exactly how to dig up information people thought they'd buried. I knew every database, every public record search, every way to trace someone's history back decades. It was time to put those skills to good use. As I walked to my car, I could hear the family erupting in heated whispers behind me. Patricia's voice rose above the rest, probably playing the victim now. But all I could think about was getting home to my laptop. Everyone has skeletons in their closet. Some people just hide them better than others. But here's the thing about being a legal assistant, you learn that nothing stays buried forever. And Patricia was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The drive home felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, and I had to keep reminding myself to breathe. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone had buzzed 17 times. I ignored every single notification. Inside, I poured myself a generous glass of wine and fired up my laptop. The familiar blue glow of the screen felt comforting, like slipping into armor I knew how to wear. This was my domain, databases, public records, court filings. This was where I had power. Patricia and Whitmore, I muttered, typing her maiden name into the first search field. Born 1965, Chicago, Illinois. Let's see what you've been hiding. The initial searches came up clean, too clean. A spotless credit report, no civil judgments, no liens. It was almost suspicious how pristine her record appeared. But I'd learned from my boss that the most interesting stuff was usually buried deeper, sometimes under variations of names or in jurisdictions people forgot about. I was 3 hours deep, cross-referencing addresses and employment records, when my phone rang. Mark's photo lit up the screen, the one from our vacation last summer where we both looked genuinely happy. God, that felt like a lifetime ago. Where are you? His voice was strained. You just left. We need to talk about this. Do we? I kept typing, pulling up another database. Because from where I was sitting, the talking was pretty one-sided. Sarah, come on. You know how my mom gets sometimes. She doesn't really mean. Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended. Just stop. Don't you dare minimize what happened tonight. Silence stretched between us. In the background, I could hear muffled voices. He was still at his parents' house. Still choosing them over me, even now. She's been like this since I was a kid, he said finally. It's just how she is. Getting into a fight with her won't change anything. A fight? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mark, your mother called me trashy in front of your entire family. She said I wasn't worthy of you. And you sat there like a statue. I was in shock. I didn't know what to say. How about don't talk to my wife like that? How about anything that showed you actually gave a damn? Another long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. She's threatening to cut me out of the will. And the business. Sarah, you don't understand everything I've worked for. There it was. The truth finally crawling out of its hole. I see. My fingers had stopped moving on the keyboard. So this is about money. It's not that simple. My whole family, the company, everything is tied up with her. If I burn that bridge, then you lose your trust fund princess lifestyle. The bitterness in my voice could have stripped paint. Got it. That's not fair. Fair? I was back to typing now, my anger fueling my focus. What's not fair is being married to someone who won't stand up for me. What's not fair is 2 years of psychological warfare from your mother while you played Switzerland. As Mark continued making excuses, something interesting popped up on my screen. A Patricia A. Whitmore, same birth year, with an address that matched one of her old employment records. But this Patricia had a very different story than the one I knew. This Patricia had been arrested. I have to go, I said, cutting Mark off mid-sentence. Sarah, wait. I hung up and stared at the screen. The arrest record was from 1987, when Patricia would have been 22. The charges were sealed, but the arrest was real. And if there was one arrest, there might be more. My phone buzzed with another text from Mark, but I was already lost in the hunt. Patricia thought she could destroy me with words? She had no idea what destruction actually looked like. The arrest record was just the beginning. By 2 a.m., I traced Patricia's paper trail through 3 states and found a pattern that made my legal assistant instinct scream. Between 1987 and 1994, Patricia and Whitmore had been a very busy woman. Credit card fraud in Illinois. Check kiting in Indiana. And the crown jewel, embezzlement charges in Ohio that somehow got mysteriously dropped. But it was a victim impact statement I found buried in the Ohio court files that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Henderson was a 78-year-old widow who trusted Ms. Whitmore with managing her finances while she recovered from hip surgery. Over the course of 6 months, Ms. Whitmore systematically drained Mrs. Henderson's accounts, stealing approximately $47,000 in retirement savings. I had to read it twice. Patricia, perfect, pristine Patricia who looked down on everyone else's moral character, had literally stolen Christmas money from a recovering elderly woman. The charges were dropped because Mrs. Henderson died before the trial, and apparently her family couldn't continue the prosecution. My hands were shaking as I screenshotted everything. The arrest photos, the court documents, the victim statements. Patricia looked so young in the mugshots, but that cold smile was exactly the same. My phone buzzed again. Mark, probably. But when I glanced at the screen, my heart nearly stopped. We need to talk. Patricia. How did she even have my number? Mark must have given it to her, though I couldn't remember them ever communicating directly. The message had come in 20 minutes ago, which meant she'd been thinking about this since I left dinner. Before I could decide whether to respond, another message appeared. I know you're upset about tonight. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. Coffee tomorrow? I think we have more in common than you realize. The hair on my arm stood up. There was something in that phrasing, more in common than you realize, that felt like a threat wrapped in fake politeness. Did she somehow know I'd been digging into her past? Was this her way of warning me off? Or was I just being paranoid because it was 2 a.m. and I'd spent 4 hours staring at evidence of her criminal history? I screenshotted her messages and saved them with the rest of my growing file. Whatever game Patricia thought she was playing, I wasn't about to walk into a blind. My laptop chimed with an email notification. My boss, Amanda, working late as usual. Sarah, hope you don't mind me reaching out on the weekend, but I wanted to give you a heads up. I just got word that the Morrison case is going to trial next month, which means we'll need those depositions transcribed ASAP. Also, random question, you mentioned your MIL works in real estate? A friend of mine is looking for a new agent and asked for recommendations. I stared at the email, my mind racing. Amanda didn't know about tonight's disaster, but her timing was eerily perfect. Patricia did work in real estate, high-end properties for wealthy clients. The kind of clients who trusted their agents with financial information, property management, house sitting. The kind of trust Patricia had apparently violated before. My phone buzzed with one more message from her, let me know about coffee. I'd hate for tonight's misunderstanding to cause problems for Mark's future. There it was, the velvet-wrapped threat I'd been expecting. Cross me, and your husband loses everything. But as I looked at the evidence spread across my screen, I realized Patricia had made a critical error. She was used to intimidating people who didn't have the resources to fight back. She'd built her new life assuming her old one would stay buried. She clearly had no idea she'd just threatened someone who dug up buried secrets for a living. And now I had a choice to make. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patricia's smug face and heard those words, someone so trashy. By 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee with hands that still trembled from rage and caffeine withdrawal. The smart thing would be to delete everything I'd found and try to make peace. That's what the old me would have done, the me who'd spent 2 years swallowing insults and making excuses for Mark's cowardice. But staring at Patricia's criminal record spread across my coffee table, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, power. My phone rang, jolting me back to reality. Mark's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But avoiding him wouldn't solve anything. We need to talk, he said without preamble. Do we? Or do you need to deliver another message from Mommy? That's not fair, Sarah. I spent 3 hours last night defending you. 3 hours? I almost laughed. It took you 3 hours to find your spine? Where was it during dinner when I actually needed you? I talked to her after you left. I told her she was out of line, that she owed you an apology. And? The pause told me everything I needed to know. She's not ready to apologize yet. But she wants to meet with you. Coffee this morning. She thinks if you two just sit down and talk. She already texted me. I picked up one of the arrest photos, studying Patricia's younger face. Interesting how she went from calling me trashy to wanting heart-to-heart chats in the span of 4 hours. Maybe she realizes she made a mistake. Or maybe she's trying to control the narrative before this blows up in her face. What's that supposed to mean? I could hear the wariness creeping into Mark's voice. He knew me well enough to recognize when I was plotting something, but not well enough to guess what. After 2 years of watching me roll over for his mother's abuse, he probably couldn't imagine me fighting back. Nothing, I lied. I'm just tired. So you'll meet with her? I'll think about it. After I hung up, I stared at my laptop screen where Patricia's messages were still open. The more I read them, the more calculated they seemed. The fake concern, the veiled threats about Mark's future, it was manipulation 101. But two could play that game. I typed back, coffee sounds lovely. Cafe Luna on 5th Street, 10 a.m.? Her response came back within minutes, perfect. Looking forward to clearing the air. I had 4 hours to decide exactly how much air I wanted to clear. By 9:30, I was sitting in Cafe Luna with a manila folder tucked discreetly in my purse. I printed everything, the arrest records, the court documents, even a few property records showing the suspicious pattern of Patricia's real estate transactions over the years. Insurance claims on houses that burned down right before foreclosure, elderly clients who died shortly after changing their wills in her favor. Patricia arrived exactly on time, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine in her cream-colored blazer and pearls. She ordered a green tea and settled across from me with that practiced smile. I'm so glad you agreed to meet, she began. I've been thinking about last night, and I realize my words may have come across harsher than I intended. May have. Not an apology, just a careful acknowledgement that I might have misunderstood her calling me trashy and unworthy. I appreciate you reaching out, I said carefully. Good. Because I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding between us. Patricia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You see, Sarah, I know what it's like to reinvent yourself. To leave behind certain aspects of your past that don't fit who you become. My blood turned to ice. She knew. Somehow, she'd figured out that I'd been digging, and this was her way of telling me she had dirt on me too. But what could she possibly know? I'd never been arrested, never committed fraud, never stolen from elderly widows. The worst thing in my past was a few unpaid parking tickets, and that time I got fired from Applebee's for arguing with a manager. And less. I'm not sure what you mean, I said, my hand instinctively moving toward my purse. Patricia's smile widened. Oh, I think you do. Tell me, does Mark know about your father? My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. What about my father? Patricia's smile turned predatory. Robert Chen. Currently serving 8 to 15 years for running a Ponzi scheme that cost investors over $2 million. Quite the family business, wasn't it? Before he got careless, of course. The cafe suddenly felt like it was spinning. My father, my biological father, not the man who'd raised me, was a name I'd buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself he didn't exist. My mother had changed our last name when I was 7, right after the trial that sent him away. I'd been Sarah Chan, but became Sarah Mitchell overnight, along with a new city and a promise we'd never talk about him again. I see you remember now, Patricia continued, stirring her tea with infuriating calm. Amazing what a private investigator can dig up when properly motivated. Turns out your apple didn't fall far from the tree, you both have such a talent for research. My hands were shaking, and I gripped the table to steady them. How did you? Please. You think I got where I am by being stupid? Patricia's laugh was sharp as glass. The moment Mark brought you home, I had you investigated. Standard practice when someone new enters the family. Most of it was boring, your little apartment, your state school education, your mother's pathetic work history. But then I found the sealed juvenile records. My stomach dropped. There were no juvenile records. There couldn't be, because I'd never been arrested as a kid. But the way she said it, so confident. I was never arrested, I whispered. No, but you were questioned. Several times, actually. Apparently, the FBI thought dear old dad might have hidden assets with family members. They grilled you for hours when you were just 13, didn't they? Looking for bank account numbers, safety deposit box keys. Must have been traumatic for such a young girl. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Agent Morrison and Agent Wells, sitting across from me in that sterile interview room while my mother sobbed in the hallway. They'd been so sure I knew something, that my father had told me where he'd hidden the money. They'd kept me there for 6 hours, asking the same questions over and over until I'd started crying so hard I made myself sick. That must be where you learned to dig through records, Patricia continued. Watching the professionals work. How poetic that you're using those skills to investigate me now. I forced myself to meet her eyes. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but I do. You see, Sarah, we're more alike than you realize. We both know what it's like to have complicated pasts. The difference is, I've learned to make my past work for me instead of running from it. By stealing from old ladies? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Patricia's teacup clinked against her saucer, the only sign I'd rattled her. Ah, she said softly. So you did find something. Good for you. We stared at each other across the small table, two women with secrets, each holding the other's destruction in their hands. But Patricia looked completely calm while my heart was hammering against my ribs. Here's what's going to happen, she said, pulling out an envelope and sliding it across the table. You're going to stop digging into my past, and I'm going to keep quiet about yours. Mark doesn't need to know his wife comes from a family of con artists. Inside the envelope were copies of the FBI interviews, my father's mugshot, and a dozen other documents I'd hoped were buried forever. What makes you think? Because, darling, Patricia interrupted, I have something you don't. I have Mark's ear. And his trust fund. You see, Patricia continued, her voice honey-sweet with poison, if Mark were to learn about your family legacy. Well, it would certainly explain why you've been so interested in financial records lately. He might start to wonder what other secrets his wife has been keeping. What other lies you've told. My throat felt like sandpaper. I never lied to him. Didn't you? What name did you give him when you first met? Sarah Mitchell, wasn't it? Not Sarah Chen, daughter of a convicted fraudster. She tilted her head with mock sympathy. That's called lying by omission, sweetheart. The worst part was she wasn't wrong. I'd never told Mark about my father, about the name change, about any of it. In the beginning, it felt too new and fragile to burden with my family's shame. Later, it became too complicated to explain why I'd waited so long. And eventually, it just became this buried thing I pretended didn't exist. Of course, Patricia went on, it would also raise questions about your current activities. A woman with your background, suddenly developing an interest in criminal records? Mark might wonder if you're planning something. If maybe the apple really didn't fall far from the tree. My purse felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, heavy with the evidence I'd gathered against her. Evidence that suddenly felt like a weapon I couldn't use without destroying myself. What do you want? I asked. I want you to remember your place. Patricia's mask slipped just enough to show the steel underneath. I want you to stop playing detective and go back to being the grateful little wife who's lucky to be included in this family. And most importantly, I want you to convince Mark that last night was just a misunderstanding between women who got off on the wrong foot. And if I don't? Then Mark learns everything. About your father. About your real name. About how his wife has been secretly investigating his family like some kind of, what's the word you people use? Oh yes. Like some kind of con artist gathering information for her next score. She stood up, smoothing down her blazer with practiced elegance. You have until the family reunion next weekend to decide. That should give you plenty of time to craft a lovely apology for your behavior last night. The family reunion. Of course. Patricia's annual dog and pony show where she held court like a queen, surrounded by 3 generations of Whitmores all competing for her approval and inheritance money. The same reunion where she'd been planning to announce Mark's promotion to senior partner in the family business. Oh, and Sarah? Patricia paused at my shoulder. I'd delete whatever little files you've compiled, if I were you. It would be such a shame if Mark found them on your computer. He might get the wrong idea about what kind of woman he married. She walked away, leaving me sitting there with my cold coffee and the envelope full of my buried shame. Around me, the cafe buzzed with normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that my world had just imploded. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. How did it go with Mom? She seems really hopeful you two worked things out. I stared at the message, feeling the walls closing in. Patricia had played this perfectly. She positioned herself as the reasonable one, extending an olive branch to her difficult daughter-in-law. If I told Mark what really happened, I'd have to explain how I knew about her criminal past. And that would lead to questions I couldn't answer without revealing everything. But there was one thing Patricia had miscalculated. She assumed I'd fold, just like I always did. She had no idea how far I was willing to go to protect the life I'd built. I sat in that cafe for another hour after Patricia left, staring at the envelope like it might spontaneously combust. Every few minutes, I'd peek inside just to make sure the documents were real, that this wasn't some elaborate nightmare I could wake up from. But there it was, my father's mugshot, my 13-year-old self-signature on FBI interview transcripts, the paper trail of a life I'd spent 15 years trying to forget. When I finally made it home, Mark was waiting in our living room, looking more anxious than I'd seen him since his bar exam results. He jumped up the moment I walked in. So? How was coffee? Mom said it went really well. I bet she did. It was educational. Good. I knew if you two just talked things through. He stopped mid-sentence, studying my face. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. More like I've been visited by one. I forced a smile. Just tired. It's been an emotional few days. Mark pulled me into his arms, and for a moment I let myself sink into the familiar comfort of his embrace. He smelled like the expensive cologne his mother bought him every Christmas, and I wondered if that would change once she destroyed our marriage. I'm really proud of you for reaching out to her, he murmured against my hair. I know she can be intense. But she means well. I pulled back to look at him. Mark, what would you do if you found out I'd been lying to you? About something big? His brow furrowed. What kind of lying? Like cheating? No. About my past. About who I am. Sarah, you're scaring me. What's this about? Before I could answer, his phone rang. Patricia's contact photo filled the screen, a professional headshot that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I should take this, Mark said apologetically. Mom? Yeah, Sarah just got home. What? Now? But we were just, his face shifted, professional mode engaging. Okay, I'll be right there. He hung up, already reaching for his keys. Emergency at the office. The Henderson property deal is falling through, and the buyers are threatening to sue. Mom needs me to review the contracts. Henderson. The name hit me like a slap. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly widow Patricia had stolen from 30 years ago. It couldn't be a coincidence. I'll probably be there all night, Mark continued, kissing my forehead. Rain check on that conversation? After he left, I sat on our couch staring at my laptop. The smart play was obvious: delete everything, apologize to Patricia at the reunion, and go back to being the grateful daughter-in-law who knew her place. But something about that Henderson property nagged at me. I pulled up the real estate listing, and my blood ran cold. It was a $4.2 million historic mansion, and the seller was listed as Eleanor Henderson, widow, age 79. Patricia was doing it again. Different Henderson, same playbook. I dove back into my databases with renewed fury. Eleanor Henderson had hired Whitmore Realty 6 months ago after her husband died. The property had been appraised at $5.8 million, but Patricia had convinced her to list it at $4.2 million for a quick sale. The buyers, a shell company I traced back to Patricia's business partner, had put down earnest money but kept finding reasons to delay closing. Meanwhile, Eleanor Henderson had moved into an expensive assisted living facility, draining her savings while the house sat empty. If the sale fell through now, she'd be financially devastated. And if it went through at the reduced price, Patricia's associates would flip it for a massive profit. My phone rang, making me jump. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Sarah Mitchell? The voice was elderly, shaky. I got your number from the real estate office. They said you might be able to help me with some questions about contracts? I think you have the wrong number, ma'am. Oh. I'm so sorry, dear. Patricia Whitmore told me to call this number if I had any concerns about my property sale. I'm Eleanor Henderson. My heart stopped. Mrs. Henderson? Yes, dear. I'm just so confused about all these papers. Patricia keeps telling me different things, and now she says the buyers want to sue me? I don't understand what I did wrong. Patricia was using my number as her front line, probably planning to record Mrs. Henderson's calls as evidence of her confusion and incompetence. Another layer of protection for her scheme. Mrs. Henderson, I said carefully, I think we should meet. I stared at my phone long after Mrs. Henderson hung up, her frail voice echoing in my head. Patricia wasn't just blackmailing me, she was actively destroying another elderly woman's life while using my phone number as cover. The sheer audacity of it made my hands shake with rage. But meeting with Mrs. Henderson would cross a line I couldn't uncross. Right now, I was just someone who'd stumbled onto Patricia's past crimes. The moment I interfered with her current scheme, I'd become an active threat. And Patricia had already shown me exactly how she dealt with threats. My laptop chimed with an email from Mark, going to be here until at least 2 a.m. Mom's really stressed about this Henderson situation. Love you. Of course she was stressed. Her latest Mark was starting to ask questions. I was still debating what to do when my phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number, my mother. Hi, Mom. Sarah, honey, I just got the strangest call. Her voice had that tight quality it got whenever the past tried to claw its way back into our lives. Some woman claiming to be a journalist, asking about your father. About the trial. My stomach plummeted. What did you tell her? Nothing. I hung up immediately. But Sarah, how did she even know to call me? We changed our names, moved states. I thought all of that was buried. Patricia. It had to be. She was tightening the screws, making sure I understood exactly how thoroughly she could destroy my life. It's probably nothing, Mom. Just some random cold call. Don't lie to me, baby. What's going on? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 15 years of secrets pressing down on me. My mother had sacrificed everything to give us a fresh start after my father's arrest. She'd worked 3 jobs, put herself through nursing school at 45, also we could have a life where people didn't whisper about us in grocery stores. I'm having some issues with Mark's mother, I said finally. She doesn't approve of me. Disapproval doesn't lead to journalists digging up ancient history, Sarah. What aren't you telling me? Before I could answer, a new email popped up on my screen. The sender made my blood freeze, eleanorh847@gmail.com. Sarah dear, Patricia gave me your email too. I've attached the contracts I'm confused about. Could you take a look? I'm so worried I've made a terrible mistake. My late husband always handled these things. The attachments were damning, a purchase agreement that locked Eleanor into the sale regardless of appraisal discrepancies, a power of attorney document giving Patricia broad control over the transaction, and most sickening of all, a new will naming Patricia as the beneficiary of Eleanor's remaining assets in gratitude for her assistance during this difficult time. My mother was still talking, but her voice sounded distant. Sarah? Are you there? I have to go, Mom. But don't talk to any more reporters, okay? Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, don't you dare hang up on me. What is? I ended the call, immediately feeling guilty. But I couldn't explain this without admitting I'd married into a family whose matriarch made my convicted felon father look like a petty shoplifter. My laptop chimed again. Another email, this one from Patricia herself. I hope you're having a productive evening. Family is so important, isn't it? Give my regards to your mother, Linda, isn't it? Such a brave woman, raising a child alone after such unpleasant circumstances. The threat was crystal clear. Patricia wasn't just coming for me, she was going after my mother too. The woman who'd rebuilt our entire lives from nothing, who still sent me care packages and worried when I didn't call her back fast enough. I stared at Eleanor Henderson's contracts, then at Patricia's message, then at my phone where 3 missed calls from my mother were already showing up. Patricia had made a critical error. She thought I was afraid of losing Mark, afraid of having my secrets exposed. And I was terrified, actually. But what she didn't understand was that threatening my mother changed everything. There are lines you don't cross. And Patricia had just sprinted over mine. I opened a new document and started typing, Mrs. Henderson, I think we need to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. And whatever you do, don't sign anything else until we meet. If Patricia wanted to play hardball, I was ready to show her what a real con artist's daughter could do. The next morning, I sat in Eleanor Henderson's cramped assisted living apartment, watching her arthritic hands shake as she poured tea from a chipped china set that had probably once graced a mansion's dining room. I don't understand why everything has to be so complicated, Eleanor said, settling into her threadbare armchair. Patricia assured me this would be simple. She said I could trust her completely. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, trying to save someone from Patricia's manipulation while being manipulated by her myself. But looking at Eleanor's confused, trusting face, I knew I couldn't walk away. Mrs. Henderson, have you actually met these buyers? Face to face? Well, no. Patricia said they prefer to work through intermediaries. Very private people, you understand. But they've been so patient with all my silly questions. My phone buzzed. Patricia again, how's your morning going? I trust you're keeping our conversation from yesterday in mind. I silenced the phone, but Eleanor noticed my expression. Is everything all right, dear? Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about the answer. Has Patricia suggested any other arrangements? Changes to your will, perhaps? Eleanor's face crumpled. How did you know about that? She said it was just a precaution, in case something happened to me before the sale completed. She's been so kind, visiting me every week, bringing me those lovely chocolates. My blood turned to ice. What chocolates? Oh, the most expensive Belgian ones. She says they're samples from some charity event. I shouldn't eat them with my diabetes, but she insists they're sugar-free. Eleanor trailed off, studying my face. Why do you look so worried? Before I could answer, someone knocked on the door. Eleanor started to get up, but I grabbed her arm. Don't answer that. The knocking continued, followed by a sickeningly familiar voice. Eleanor? It's Patricia. I brought those papers we discussed. Eleanor looked between me and the door, confusion clouding her features. But I told her I was meeting with you this morning. She said she'd come by to help explain things. Of course she did. Patricia had probably been monitoring Eleanor's communications, waiting for exactly this moment. And now I was trapped in a 90-year-old woman's apartment while my blackmailer stood outside the door. Eleanor, sweetheart? Patricia called. I can hear voices in there. I hope you haven't let any strangers in. You know how these scam artists prey on people in your situation. The audacity was breathtaking. Patricia was literally running a scam while warning her victim about other scammers. My phone rang, Mark's ringtone. Eleanor jumped at the sound, and I saw her hand move toward the door. Please, I whispered. Don't let her in yet. But Eleanor was already shuffling toward the door, her ingrained politeness overriding her growing confusion. I'm sorry, dear, but Patricia has been nothing but helpful. If she says you might be trying to trick me. The lock turned just as my phone stopped ringing. Through the opening door, I saw Patricia's perfectly composed face shift from fake concern to cold fury the moment she spotted me. Sarah, she said pleasantly. What a surprise. Behind her stood someone I didn't recognize, a tall man in an expensive suit with a kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Patricia's business partner, maybe. Or worse. I was just leaving, I said, standing quickly. Oh, but we're all here now. Patricia stepped into the apartment, the man following close behind. Why don't we all sit down and discuss Mrs. Henderson's concerns together? I'm sure we can clear up any misunderstandings. Eleanor looked between us, finally sensing the undercurrents of tension she'd been missing. I think perhaps. Actually, the man spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a subtle accent I couldn't place. I think Sarah and I should step outside. Let the ladies discuss business. It wasn't a suggestion. Patricia's smile widened as my phone started buzzing again. Family is so important, don't you think, Sarah? I do hope everyone stays safe. I felt the blood drain from my face as the man stepped closer, his smile never wavering. Eleanor seemed to shrink into her chair, finally understanding that something was very wrong. Actually, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, I think we should all stay right here. Mrs. Henderson, you mentioned you had questions about those contracts? Patricia's eyes flashed with irritation, but she couldn't object without looking suspicious. Of course. Though I'm curious, Sarah, what exactly is your expertise in real estate law? The question hung in the air like a blade. She was testing whether I'd reveal my legal background, probably hoping I'd give her more ammunition about my suspicious interest in contracts and criminal records. I work for a law firm, I said carefully. I've seen my share of property disputes. How interesting. The same law firm where you've been accessing criminal databases, perhaps? Eleanor's head snapped up. Criminal databases? I don't understand. My phone buzzed again, Mark calling for the third time. The man by the door glanced at Patricia, some silent communication passing between them. You should answer that, Patricia said sweetly. Mark gets so worried when you don't respond. I had no choice. With everyone watching, I picked up the call. Sarah, thank God. Where are you? Mark's voice was strained, urgent. Mom called and said you've been harassing one of her clients? What the hell is going on? I'm not harassing anyone. She's worried about you. Says you've been acting strange lately, asking weird questions about her work. Are you having some kind of breakdown? I could see Patricia's satisfied expression as she listened to my half of the conversation. She'd probably spent an hour this morning poisoning Mark against me, setting up this moment. Mark, I can explain everything, but not right now. Then when? You've been secretive for days, disappearing at all hours, avoiding my calls. And now you're bothering Mom's clients with conspiracy theories? Eleanor was watching me with growing alarm, and I realized how this must look from her perspective. A strange woman had inserted herself into her business dealings, claiming her trusted real estate agent was a criminal. No wonder she was confused. I have to go, I told Mark. No, you need to come home right now. We need to talk about this before. I hung up, my hands shaking. Patricia looked triumphant. Trouble in paradise? She asked with mock sympathy. Marriage is so fragile, isn't it? Built on trust and honesty. When those foundations crack. Mrs. Henderson, I said desperately, those chocolates Patricia's been bringing you, have you felt sick after eating them? Confused or disoriented? That's enough. The man finally spoke again, pulling out his phone. Mrs. Henderson, I think you should call building security. This woman is clearly disturbed. Eleanor looked terrified now, caught between competing versions of reality. I could see her reaching for the emergency button by her chair. Please, I begged. Just Google Patricia's name. Look up Patricia Whitmore and fraud charges. The truth is all there. Sarah, Patricia's voice carried a warning that made my skin crawl. I think you're forgetting our conversation yesterday. About the importance of family. About protecting the people we love. She pulled out her own phone, showing me the screen. A photo of my mother's house, taken from across the street. Recent, there was snow on the ground that had just fallen last night. My blood turned to ice. You're watching my mother? Watching is such an ugly word. Let's say I'm keeping tabs on family. Eleanor pressed her emergency button. Somewhere in the building, alarms started going off. The emergency alarms echoed through the hallway like a death knell. Eleanor sat frozen in her chair, her finger still pressed to the button, staring at us with a dawning realization that she'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple real estate dispute. Now look what you've done, Patricia said, her mask of politeness finally slipping. You've frightened this poor woman half to death with your paranoid delusions. But I was focused on the photo of my mother's house still glowing on Patricia's phone screen. The angle was wrong for a random drive-by shot. Someone had been parked across the street, waiting. Watching. Who did you send to my mother's house? I demanded. The man by the door checked his watch with practiced casualness. Security will be here in approximately 90 seconds. Perhaps we should all remain calm. My phone exploded with notifications, 3 missed calls from Mark, 2 from unknown numbers, and a text that made my stomach drop. Honey, there's been someone sitting outside the house all morning. Should I be worried? Mom. Patricia saw me reading and smiled. Concerned neighbors are so thoughtful, aren't they? Always keeping an eye on things. Eleanor's voice came out as a whisper. I just wanted to sell my house. Harold always handled everything. I don't understand what's happening. The helplessness in her tone cut through my panic. This woman had lost her husband, her home, and now her sense of safety, all because she trusted the wrong person. Just like dozens of victims before her. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway, building security approaching fast. Patricia smoothed her blazer and arranged her features into an expression of concerned authority. When they arrive, she said quietly, you're going to tell them this was all a misunderstanding. That you came here to apologize for your behavior yesterday, and things got emotional. And if I don't? Then your mother gets a visit from some very unstable individuals. The kind who might mistake a peaceful neighborhood for somewhere more dangerous. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Patricia's smile turned predatory. Your choice, Sarah. But choose quickly. A sharp knock interrupted us. Security. Mrs. Henderson, are you all right? Eleanor looked at me with pleading eyes, caught between her fear of Patricia and her growing understanding that I was trying to help her. The poor woman was 80 years old and probably hadn't faced a moral crisis this complex since deciding whether to put her husband in hospice care. Mrs. Henderson, I said urgently, what would Harold want you to do? Her chin lifted slightly at her husband's name. Harold always said to trust my instincts. And my instincts say something's very wrong here. Patricia's carefully maintained composure cracked. Eleanor, you're confused. The stress of the move, your medication. I'm not taking any medication that would confuse me, Eleanor said sharply. And I may be old, but I'm not stupid. The security guard knocked again, more insistently. Ma'am, we need to come in and assess the situation. Patricia shot me a look of pure venom before transforming her expression back to concerned helpfulness. She moved toward the door, but I stepped in front of her. Mrs. Henderson, I called out, tell them to run a background check on Patricia Whitmore before they do anything else. Tell them to look up her arrest record from 1987. You have no idea what you're unleashing, Patricia hissed. The man pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. Probably calling for backup, or worse, escalating whatever threat they'd positioned near my mother. As the security guard's key turned in the lock, I realized that everything I'd worked for, my marriage, my carefully constructed life, my mother's safety, was about to explode in an elderly woman's living room. And I still had no idea how to stop it. The security guard stepped into the apartment, a heavy-set man in his 50s who looked like he'd seen enough drama in this building to fill a novel. His eyes swept the room, taking in the tension radiating from our little group like heat waves. Mrs. Henderson called for emergency assistance, he said, his hand resting casually on his radio. What's the situation here? Patricia immediately stepped forward, her concerned daughter-in-law act sliding back into place like a well-worn mask. Officer, thank goodness you're here. I'm Patricia Whitmore from Whitmore Realty. Mrs. Henderson is one of my clients, and this woman, she gestured at me, has been harassing her with wild accusations. That's not true, I said, but my voice came out strained, desperate. Exactly how someone harassing elderly clients would sound when caught. The security guard's attention shifted to Eleanor, who sat clutching her teacup like a lifeline. Mrs. Henderson? Can you tell me what happened? Eleanor's watery eyes darted between us. I could see her weighing her words, understanding that whatever she said next would set something irreversible in motion. This young lady came to warn me about something, she said finally. About Patricia. She says there are things I should know. Patricia's laugh was perfectly calibrated, concerned but not dismissive. Eleanor, dear, we discussed this. You've been under tremendous stress since Harold passed. Sometimes grief can make us paranoid, see threats where none exist. I saw the contracts, Eleanor said, her voice growing stronger. The will changes. The chocolates that make me feel funny. The security guard frowned. What chocolates? Before Eleanor could answer, my phone rang again. Mark's name flashed on the screen, and Patricia's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. You should answer that, she said. He sounds worried. With shaking hands, I declined the call, but immediately a text came through. Sarah, I'm at Mom's office. The police want to talk to you about harassment charges. Where are you? The blood drained from my face. Patricia had been busy this morning, spinning her web while I'd been focused on saving Eleanor. She'd probably spent hours painting me as an unstable woman targeting her innocent business. Problem? The man by the door asked, still typing on his phone. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Your mother seems upset about something. Keeps looking out her window. Hope she stays safe indoors today. They weren't just watching my mother, they were close enough to see her reactions in real time. Close enough to know she was scared. Officer, I said, turning to the security guard, I need you to run a background check on Patricia Whitmore. Criminal history, arrest records from the 1980s. Patricia's mask slipped just enough to show her fury. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Paranoid accusations with no basis in reality. If there's no basis, then you won't mind him checking, I shot back. The security guard looked uncomfortable with the escalating situation. Ladies, I think we need to. His radio crackled to life. Unit 12, we have reports of suspicious activity at 847 Maple Street. Elderly resident requested a wellness check. My mother's address. I felt the room spin as Patricia's smile widened. Oh dear, she said with false sympathy. I hope your mother is all right. These days, you never know what kind of dangerous people might be lurking in quiet neighborhoods. Eleanor's teacup rattled against its saucer. Harold always said bullies count on good people being too scared to fight back. The security guard was still waiting for direction, his radio crackling with updates about the situation at my mother's house. Patricia's associate had moved closer to the door, effectively blocking my exit. And somewhere across town, Mark was sitting in a police station, probably signing statements about his unstable wife who'd been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior. Patricia had orchestrated this perfectly. Every move I'd made to expose her had been anticipated, countered, turned against me. She'd spent decades perfecting this game while I'd been playing it for 3 days. But as I looked at Eleanor's frightened face, I realized that winning had never been the point. Sometimes the only victory is making sure the truth survives, even if you don't. Officer, I said, my voice steadying with sudden resolve, I'm a legal assistant at Morrison, Wells and Associates. I have documentation of an ongoing elder abuse scheme that needs immediate investigation. Patricia's eyes flashed dangerously. Documentation? You mean the files you illegally obtained through criminal databases? Using access from your employment for personal vendettas? The security guard's radio crackled again. Unit 12, resident at Maple Street reports multiple suspicious vehicles now. Requesting immediate backup. Multiple vehicles. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized the scope of what Patricia had unleashed. This wasn't just intimidation anymore, this was a coordinated operation. Mrs. Henderson, I said urgently, where do you keep important documents? Insurance papers, financial records? Eleanor pointed shakily toward a small desk by the window. In the filing cabinet, but I don't understand. Because, I said, moving toward the desk while keeping my eyes on Patricia, real estate fraud isn't the only crime being committed here. Identity theft, elder abuse, financial exploitation, this is a federal case. The man by the door stepped forward. I think we've heard enough. Actually, Eleanor's voice cut through the tension like a blade, I'd like to see these documents the young lady mentioned. If there's nothing to hide, Patricia, you won't mind. Patricia's composure cracked further. Eleanor, you're being manipulated by someone with serious mental health issues. Look at her, she's clearly having some kind of episode. But Eleanor was already pulling out a thick manila folder from her filing cabinet. These are copies of everything you gave me to sign, Patricia. Everything. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Your mother just called 911. How unfortunate. Sometimes these situations escalate quickly. The words hit me like ice water. They weren't just watching anymore, they were actively threatening her safety, probably in ways that would look like random crime or accidents. Officer, I need to call my supervisor at Morrison, Wells, I said, pulling up Amanda's number. She can verify my credentials and the legitimacy of my investigation. Don't you dare, Patricia snarled, her mask finally dropping completely. You have no idea what you're destroying. The people I work with don't take kindly to interference. The security guard stepped back, his hand moving to his radio. Ma'am, are you threatening? I'm stating facts, Patricia said coldly. Some situations are too complex for local security to handle. Sometimes they require specialized attention. Eleanor gasped, clutching the folder to her chest. Harold was right about you. He never trusted you, said something felt wrong. I should have listened. Your husband was a senile old man who died broke, Patricia snapped, her veneer of professionalism evaporating entirely. Just like you'll be if you don't sign those papers. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Patricia seemed to realize she'd revealed too much, said the quiet part out loud. The security guard was already reaching for his radio, his face grim with understanding. But before anyone could move, my phone exploded with notifications. Mark calling, unknown numbers texting, and finally, terrifyingly, my mother's ringtone. Sarah? Her voice was shaky, scared. There are men at my door. They say they're with some kind of service company, but I didn't call anyone. What should I do? Patricia smiled, cold and triumphant. Decisions have consequences, Sarah. Choose very carefully what you say next. The security guard was calling for backup, Eleanor was crying softly, and somewhere 30 miles away, my mother was trapped in her house with Patricia's people at the door. And I finally understood that this had never been about real estate fraud or family secrets. This was about power. And Patricia would destroy anyone who threatened hers. The world narrowed to my mother's terrified voice through the phone speaker. Everything else, Eleanor's tears, the security guard's radio chatter, Patricia's cold smile, faded into background noise. Mom, don't open the door, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Call 911 right now. I already did, but they said it might be 20 minutes before, her voice cut off, replaced by the sound of aggressive knocking. Ma'am, we need to inspect your gas lines, a muffled male voice came through the phone. Emergency leak reported in the neighborhood. Patricia's associate was still typing rapidly on his phone, probably coordinating with whoever was at my mother's house. The security guard had stepped into the hallway to radio for police backup, but I could see the calculation in Patricia's eyes. How much damage could she do before real authority arrived? Eleanor, I said urgently, those contracts in your folder, is there anything about medical power of attorney? Emergency contacts? Eleanor's hand shook as she rifled through papers. Yes, oh my god. It says if I become incapacitated, Patricia has the right to make decisions about my care. Including institutionalization, I realized with growing horror. She's not just stealing your money, she's setting up a way to have you declared incompetent if you resist. Patricia laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. You think you're so clever. But you still don't understand the scope of what you're interfering with. My phone buzzed with a new text from the unknown number. Gas leaks can be so dangerous. Especially for elderly women who might not notice the smell. The threat was crystal clear. They weren't just intimidating my mother, they were setting up what would look like a tragic accident. Officer. I called to the security guard, but he was deep in conversation with dispatch, explaining the increasingly complex situation. Eleanor had gone pale, clutching a document. There's more. Sarah, look at this. She held up a medical form. Patricia convinced me to sign up for some experimental diabetes treatment. Said it would be covered by my insurance, help with the confusion I've been having. I scanned the paperwork, my blood turning to ice. It wasn't a legitimate medical trial, it was authorization for Patricia to administer medication with minimal oversight. The perfect cover for keeping Eleanor compliant and confused while the financial exploitation continued. Those chocolates, Eleanor whispered. They're not sugar-free, are they? Ma'am? My mother's voice came through the phone again, weaker now. The knocking stopped. But I can smell something, like gas. Terror shot through me like lightning. Mom, get out of the house. Now. Go to the neighbors, anywhere but there. I'm trying, but the back door won't open. It's like something's blocking it. Patricia's smile widened. Sometimes people trap themselves in their own homes. Especially when they're not thinking clearly. The security guard finally returned, his face grim. Police are en route, but there's been a major accident on the highway. ETA is 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Enough time for a gas leak to become a tragedy, for Eleanor to be convinced to sign more papers, for Patricia's people to disappear like they'd never existed. There has to be something else, I muttered, frantically thinking through my options. Then it hit me, Amanda's email from yesterday. She'd mentioned the Morrison case going to trial, which meant. I pulled up my phone's recording app and hit start, praying Patricia wouldn't notice. You know what I don't understand, I said, trying to sound defeated. How do you coordinate all of this? The property scams, the medical fraud, the intimidation. It must take serious organization. Patricia's ego couldn't resist. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to look the other way when the money's right. Doctors, lawyers, city officials, everyone has a price. Even judges? Especially judges. You think your little law firm is so impressive? Half our cases get dismissed before they reach trial. The other half? Well, let's just say justice is more flexible than people realize. Eleanor gasped, but I kept pushing. What about the federal investigators? Surely they're harder to buy off. Federal investigators focus on big fish. And as far as they know, I'm just a successful real estate agent who's very good at helping elderly clients simplify their lives. My phone was still recording every word, capturing Patricia's casual admission of corruption that went far beyond simple fraud. But my mother was still trapped, and Eleanor was still in immediate danger. The security guard's radio crackled. Unit 12, reports of possible gas leak at Maple Street address. Fire department dispatched. Patricia checked her watch. Timing is everything in this business. Wouldn't want anyone to be in the wrong place when accidents happen. That's when I realized Patricia had made her first real mistake. She was so confident in her control, so sure of her victory, that she'd forgotten the most important rule of any con game. Never underestimate a desperate woman with nothing left to lose. I looked Patricia straight in the eyes and smiled. You're absolutely right about timing. Then I did something that caught everyone off guard. I started laughing. Not the hysterical kind, but the cold, calculating laughter of someone who just realized they were holding all the cards. What's so funny? Patricia demanded, but I could see uncertainty creeping into her expression. You made one critical error, I said, holding up my phone. You assumed I was recording this for myself. Patricia's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Live streamed to my law firm's emergency server, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Audio and video automatically uploaded to our secure database. The same system we use for protected witness testimonies. It was a lie, but a convincing one. Patricia's associate stopped typing, his confidence wavering. But here's the beautiful part, I continued, pulling up Amanda's contact. My boss has been investigating judicial corruption for the Morrison case. She's been looking for evidence of exactly what you just confessed to. I hit call and put it on speaker. Amanda picked up on the first ring. Sarah? I got your emergency alert. What's? Amanda, I got a live confession of federal crimes, elder abuse, and judicial corruption. I need immediate FBI contact and emergency services at 847 Maple Street. On it. Recording everything now. Local field office is already mobilizing. Patricia lunged for my phone, but the security guard stepped between us. Ma'am, I need you to remain calm. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Patricia snarled, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. Actually, I do, I said. Patricia and Whitmore, aka Patricia Chen, aka Patricia Donovan. 3 identities, 40 years of fraud, and a network of corruption that's about to come crashing down. Eleanor looked up from her papers, suddenly understanding. Chen? But that's my father's name, I confirmed. The difference is, he got caught. Patricia learned from his mistakes and got better at covering her tracks. Until now. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, men left when fire trucks arrived. I'm safe at the neighbors. Relief flooded through me, but I kept my expression steady. Patricia was cornered now, dangerous in the way of wounded predators. You think this ends here? She hissed. I have connections you can't imagine. Money hidden in places. I corrected. Past tense. Because while you were busy threatening my family, my boss was tracing the financial records I sent her yesterday. Every shell company, every offshore account, every dirty penny. Sirens wailed in the distance, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Patricia's associate was already edging toward the window, looking for escape routes. Eleanor stood up, her voice stronger than I'd heard it all day. Harold always said bad people count on good people being too scared to fight back. But sometimes, good people fight back anyway. The apartment door burst open as FBI agents flooded in, followed by local police. Patricia's mask finally shattered completely as reality hit her. This wasn't a game she could manipulate her way out of. As they led her away in handcuffs, she turned back to me. This won't stick. I have too many people protecting me. I said again. Past tense. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse watching Patricia and 17 co-conspirators receive their sentences. The corruption network had unraveled completely once people started talking to save themselves. Eleanor got her house back and sued for damages. My mother moved closer to me so I could keep an eye on her. And Mark? Well, Mark learned that sometimes the trashy girl from the wrong side of town is exactly the right person to have in your corner. As for me? I finally understood that my father's daughter wasn't someone to be ashamed of. She was someone to be reckoned with.